Is Syracuse basketball going to make the ACC tournament?
You are Locked On Syracuse, your daily podcast on the Syracuse Orange. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello, everyone, and welcome into Locked On Syracuse. I'm Jackson Holzer, and thank you for making us your first listen of every single day here on the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. We are free and available wherever you get your podcasts. This is part 2 of the conversation with Neil Adler from Inside the Loud House. In case you missed part 1, don't worry. We talked about Syracuse basketball and their loss against Pitt. Yep, we did. It just doesn't make sense to us how you blow a 16-point lead and still lose by 11 points. We also talked a lot about Elijah Moore in part 1, so be sure to check it out when you are done watching or listening to this podcast, because now myself and Neil, we're going to talk about the ACC Tournament. They might not make it, Neil. They might not make it. So I'm going to start off with a softball. And it's a yes or no question. Do you think that Syracuse basketball is going to make the ACC tournament?
Yes. Yes. So I'm just pulling up the standings here. They're in 15th right now, but
Right.
So the 3 teams behind them: NC State, Boston College, Miami. Obviously, lose the tiebreaker with Miami. NC State, they have lost a ton of games recently. They've got North Carolina tonight. They got Wake Forest. Then they got us. And they got Georgia Tech, Pitt, Miami. Yeah, I think they're going to make it. Well, let me put it to you this way. If they beat NC State a week from today, yeah, I think they're going to get in. Just given NC State's recent performances and who they got coming up, and I don't think Miami's going to catch Syracuse. I mean, Syracuse's 4 games are NC State and Virginia at home, and then SMU and Virginia Tech on the road. I mean, 3 out of the 4 of them are winnable. I don't know about SMU on the road. I mean, maybe they could. I mean, SMU is a pretty good team. But yeah, I think they're going to make it. Do you?
I'm iffy on this.
Iffy?
So keep in mind, we're recording this before NC State plays North Carolina. It's a home game for NC State, but I do not think it's a road game.
It is.
They are going to North Carolina. You're watching this on Thursday morning, so you're watching or listening, I should say. You already know the result of that game.
Fair.
Regardless, even if they lose, NC State would only be a game and a half behind Syracuse. If they win, they're a half game behind Syracuse. They'd be at 4-11, whereas Syracuse is at 5-11. First of all, I can't believe we're having this conversation. This is just stupid that we're having it to begin with. There is not a single excuse in the world as to why we should be having this conversation, yet here we are.
Yeah.
It comes down to NC State, I think, on that February 26th night. So if you beat NC State, you're in. If you don't beat NC State, I think you're out. It's as simple as that, because NC State's schedule, let's say they lose the next 2 games. I mean, I'm including the North Carolina game, which, again, we don't know about. Maybe they lose to Wake Forest at home as well. But if they beat Syracuse, they're at 4 conference wins. The Orange would be at 5, and they would own the tiebreaker.
Correct.
So all they would have to do is pretty much match Syracuse from then on out. They could, and they have winnable games. They can go to Georgia Tech and maybe win that one.
Mm-hmm.
They could beat Pitt at home. I think Pitt is a team that you can beat at home. It's not like Pitt is that great of a team anyway. I mean, Syracuse made them look amazing in the final 30 minutes, but they're not that great. And their final game of the season is at Miami. There is a very real scenario, Neil, where Syracuse basketball, they play a night game against Virginia to end the regular season, that they're already eliminated. Can you believe that?
That would be unfortunate.
That could happen.
Yeah. I mean, the one other thing I'll mention here, just because I got the standings up, is, Syracuse right now is at 5-11 in ACC games, and just right above them, half game or 1 game out in the loss column is Cal. And they've lost 3 in a row, just like Syracuse overall. And Syracuse did win at Cal, so they do own the tiebreaker. I'd have to pull up Cal's, remaining games, but yeah, I mean, I guess the bottom line for me is I really hate this conversation, and I mean, I love talking to you, but I just hate this. We're literally talking about if Syracuse is going to qualify now. And granted, part of the reason we're having this it's 2-part. Number one, because Syracuse is really having a rough season, and number two, this up until this year, the ACC tournament everyone was invited, and obviously with the 3 teams coming in, Stanford, SMU, and Cal, 18 teams, only 15 get in. So it's what a bummer if they don't even play in the ACC tour. I mean, that's sad. That is really sad. So I still I'm holding out hope that they're going to get in, whether it's because they beat NC State and just stay above them, or if Cal has some hiccups and they own the tiebreaker over Cal because they won out Cal. I like to think they're going to get in, but maybe that's just me being naive.
You know what? Here's the deal. So it's interesting that you bring up Cal. That Cal game still remains so important that Syracuse basketball won. I knew that game would be so important for them to actually make the ACC tournament, especially because they lost to Miami. You needed that win to at least balance them out. If we just beat Miami, we'd be freaking in. We wouldn't even have to have this conversation. But
yeah.
It's interesting you brought up Cal. I'm looking at their schedule. They have a very winnable game left. They have multiple winnable games. They have at Notre Dame to end the season. They actually play at the same time Syracuse plays Virginia. So it'd be really funny if both were playing at the same time for their ACC tournament date.
Right.
But Cal plays a home game against Boston College on March 1st.
Okay.
So if Cal wins that one, that gives them 6 conference wins. So even if Syracuse owns the tiebreaker, you still need to get one more win to match Cal. So Cal is still in a pretty good spot because they have that game against Boston. Boston College is everyone's cupcake. They're everyone's. You have to beat Boston College at home. Syracuse basketball almost lost to Boston College at home, but you know what? They did end up winning, so it counts in the standings. They did beat Boston College twice, by the way. But Cal has that one. So if they get to 6 conference games, and I'm looking at Syracuse's schedule, if you don't beat NC State, then you could miss. You could miss. It's as simple as that for me. So I'm very iffy on it. I guess my gut tells me they will make it, but I'm not necessarily going to put any confidence in this team.
Oh, sure. I wouldn't like go to Vegas and bet on it. We'll see. I mean, NC State's really, I think they have 1 win in like their last, I'd have to count it up, but they're 1, 2, 3, 4. Looks like they lost 9 in a row before they beat Boston College recently. So
they beat Boston College at home, I might add. That's the cupcake for everyone. So Cal has that game on their schedule.
Yeah. So I'd like to think Syracuse have, week off, regroup, whatever. They're at home for that game. NC State clearly has struggled this year, although, hey, listen, they just beat BC to snap a 9-game losing streak. If they, somehow knocked off North Carolina, an in-state a fierce rival, and I think they've got Wake on Saturday. So, I mean, who knows? They could come into that game next Wednesday, having won some games and feeling better about things. So, that's kind of speculation at this point. But if Syracuse could win that game at home, that would be huge. But I don't have a lot of confidence like you.
No. Nope, not at all. I don't think anyone is confident right now.
Yeah, it's a shame. It's a shame.
It stinks. Attention, Locked On Syracuse fans. The future of college sports is here, and it's transparent. Before the Roy app, NIL negotiations often happened under the table, and fans didn't have a clear way to directly support the athletes they love. Now with Roy, you get to be a part of the change and support Syracuse athletes in the most transparent way possible. Roy, the NIL app, allows you to choose the player you want to support, decide how much you want to contribute, receive exclusive content from the athletes you back, and the best part, if your player transfers, you get your money back. It's a risk-free way to show your support. The Roy app is giving fans control, no more uncertainty. Now you can provide transparent, impactful support and help shape the team and the future of college sports with your contributions. Download the Roy app now from the App Store and start backing Syracuse athletes the way they deserve with transparency, trust, and a real impact. This is the future of college sports. Join it now by downloading Roy and supporting your favorite players.
Yeah.
We're joined by Neil Adler from Inside the Loud House. This is part 2 of our conversation. We're making it more macro here. We're talking about the ACC tournament. Let's talk about something maybe a little bit controversial. All right. So I think a lot of people are aware of the tweet. It's gotten a lot of headlines. I didn't tweet it. It was from Syracuse.com's very own Brent Axe. And he basically said, and he was half joking, I might add. He was half joking about this, about, do people even want Syracuse basketball in the conference tournament? So, Neil, I'll give you this softball, yes or no, and we can stem from there. I mean, do you want to see Syracuse basketball in the ACC tournament?
Yes, I do. And I agree that Brent, and I like Brent a lot, and he obviously knows his stuff. And I think he was saying it maybe a little tongue in cheek, although who knows with tones on social media. And there probably are some fans that are like ready for the season to be over. But me personally, yes, I would like to see them fight to the finish in the regular season, hopefully qualify for the ACC tournament. And we know that since Syracuse joined the ACC in 2013, 2014, they've stunk in the ACC tournament. They've never won, correct me if I'm wrong, they've never won more than one game in a single ACC tournament and had many tournaments where they lost their opening game. So maybe it would just be a Syracuse thing to go this year and win multiple games and make a run to the semis or something, but no, I want to see them fight. I want to see them play. It's a neutral site. Neutral site, depending on who you're playing against. It's in Charlotte, so some of those Carolina teams. But, other than Duke, Syracuse, if they're on their game, so to speak, they could win some games. Why not? I want to see them play. I know the season's been a disaster. And so some people are like, I'm apathetic. I'm done. I'm ready for a new season, a new head coach, etc. But no, I want these guys to, I want to see them end it on a positive note. And if that doesn't mean they're going to win the ACC tournament, assuming they get in, but if they could get in and win a game or two, yeah, I'd love that. I'd love to see that.
Fair enough.
What about you?
So I'm not going to tell people how they should feel.
Sure.
And I completely understand if they are apathetic and don't care or not. And I'm not going to try to convince you to care. I'm just going to tell you why I care, because I do. I don't see the benefit in missing the ACC tournament. What is the end solution if Syracuse basketball misses it? If they make it, what the upside is, even if they're not going to achieve it, right? That if you win it, you're in the NCAA tournament, which is not going to happen. It's not. We know that. But at least you're playing more basketball and you avoid the embarrassment of actually missing a conference tournament.
I think the optics of missing it is awful.
It's awful if you miss it. The optics are terrible. And also, again, it goes back to my point about, what happens if they do miss it? Are you telling me that Adrian Autry is gone? Are you telling me there's going to be sweeping changes to the program as far as the coaching staff and all the players? Do you think that this program's going to drop an atomic bomb on Syracuse basketball if they miss the ACC tournament? I'm of the belief that I don't think it matters. I think that if Syracuse basketball loses out the year, they go 11-20, and they miss the ACC tournament, they're still going to run it all back in year 3 with this coaching staff. I don't see them not doing that. I think they are. There's been no indication that they're going to let anyone go. None. So, and even if, let's say that were the case, right? Jackson, if they miss the ACC tournament, they will let go of Adrian Autry. They will fire some coaches. They will completely change everything around, which they're already going to change around the players anyway.
Mm-hmm.
I would still tell you this. I want to be wrong.
Mm-hmm. Of course.
I want to be wrong. I want to be wrong on these coaches. Like, I want to talk about next year how, man, wasn't it silly, Neil, how we had these conversations throughout the season about how we should maybe let you less so, but me, a lot of, we should probably change the coaches and everything like that. Like, man, we were silly. Adrian Autry has this team in great shape. They're 25-4 right now. We're going to be a 3 seed in the NCAA tournament. Like, what were we thinking? We're stupid, right? I'd rather that happen than the alternative of missing the conference tournament outright completely. And it's conflicting, but that's just where I'm at with it. I would rather see them make it and lose early than not make it altogether.
Yeah, I think the optics of missing the ACC tournament the first year where not every team qualifies is it's just not good. I mean, obviously it adds more fuel to the fire for, the part of the fan base that is ready to move on from Coach Red and his staff. And that's fine. Like you said, if people want to feel that way, you do you. I'm not like wishing like more despair on this program. I want them to, try and play as well as they can the rest of the regular season, maybe pick up a couple games and then go to Charlotte and see what the matchups are and see what happens. I think regardless of what this season, how it plays out the rest, like you said, if they go 0-4 and end up 11-20 overall, I still think Autry will be back. And will there be, some changes on the staff? That remains to be seen. But I think he'll be back regardless. I just don't see. I think the fact that he won 20 games in his first season and they had such a roster overhaul this year, they've had some injuries. I don't think, as we've talked about multiple times, I don't think the 2025 recruiting class at the high school level is like, I think there's some nice pieces there and excitement, but I don't think they're going to come in and just like lead this team to a Final Four. They need, whether it's JJ Starling and Moore and Freeman coming back, and then maybe like to say faring better in the portal, so to speak. Nothing against the guys that came in, but just faring better. But then again, maybe as much as I love Coach Autry and he was a great player here and he was, he can obviously recruit. Maybe he's not the guy. I don't know. But I feel like continuing to talk about it over and over again. This is not directed at you, but just like, the fan base just finish out this season, see what the roster construction looks like for next year. Again, I would be stunned regardless of how the season plays out. I'd be stunned if Autry is let go. And let's just see. And then if you and I hope we're not, but if you and I always love talking to you, but if we're talking the same kind of record and performance, level a year from now, then something's going to have to change because this program, this brand, it's still a national brand, but it's not the same as it once was. We need to change that. I mean, it needs to, and, I know there's NIL and future revenue sharing and all this other stuff, but there's no reason that Syracuse basketball shouldn't be. And I know they're in the ACC. It's not the Big East. But look, they need to do better. And so we'll see. But yeah, I agree with you. I'm not like wishing they lose and don't qualify for the ACC tournament. I want to see them win out and then win a few games in the ACC tournament, finish with above a 500 record, and have some like positive thinking going into the off season.
I agree with you on that. Two things. Number one, I think we all assume that if Syracuse basketball were to make the ACC tournament, again, can't believe we're having this conversation about whether or not they're going to make it or not, but let's say they make the conference tournament. Who's to say that they can't win one game?
Sure.
Like, I have been super negative, okay, everyone? I have told you like it is. I have been this whole season telling you like it is, how I see it, that this team stinks, okay? But guess what? So does the ACC. And reality is Syracuse does have 5 conference wins somehow. And right now, if you look at the matchups in the conference, 10 versus 15 is a matchup against Florida State. That doesn't really seem good for Syracuse basketball, considering how that game went in January. But let's say Syracuse basketball beats Virginia, the final game of the season, and they're already in the conference tournament, and Virginia ends up being the 10 seed. Maybe they can beat them again, or maybe it's Virginia Tech gets that 10 seed or something like that. Or maybe Syracuse basketball climbs into the 14 or 13 seed, and they're playing Virginia Tech or Notre Dame again. So I'm not going to sit here and try to tell you, guys, I think Syracuse basketball can go on a run in the ACC tournament. What I am telling you is that the ACC is so bad, and it actually benefits Syracuse to the point where they could win a tournament game for what it's worth. They could win it. That leads me to point number 2, Neil.
Yeah.
You ready for this one?
Sure.
I'm already ready for the podcast when Adrian Autry does get a third year, because it's going to be pretty funny on this podcast. You ready for it? You want to hear what I'm going to do?
Yes, I do.
We're going to go through the 5 stages of grief together. I think most people don't want Adrian Autry back, but we are going to have a whole podcast dedicated to the 5 stages of grief. Hold on. Let me pull up the 5 stages of grief.
That's funny. I look forward to that.
We're going to go through denial. Okay. We're going to start off denying it. Like Syracuse basketball they didn't actually bring this guy back for a third year. There's no way they did that. Then we're going to go through anger. I cannot believe they actually did this. They are freaking morons. Then we're going to bargain about it. Like, hey, maybe we just have to keep suffering through this season and it'll lead to the promised land. You bargain. Then there'll be depression. We'll probably have about a 3-minute stretch on the podcast where I just don't talk because I'll be depressed. And then I'll just accept it and just be like, you know what? All right, they brought him back. We might as well just try to rally around him for another year, because that's what it's going to be. We're going to go through the 5 stages of grief when Adrian Autry returns for a third year. I hope Wild Hack is listening. It's going to be hilarious.
I look forward to that conversation. That'd be really funny. I'll have a beer in hand or something, Yeah, I don't know. I guess my talking point to you here is, and you're obviously on social media just as much as me and talk to a lot of people. Like, do you think like the majority of the fan base wants Autry gone, or is it just like a contingent that's very vocal on social media? And obviously you're seeing more of it. Absolutely. But like, I don't know. I still think there's fans out there that are saying, okay, fine, the season's been a disaster, but the first season was pretty good, and you're replacing a legend and who obviously had his own struggles his last few years, but still, one losing season in 47 years. That's still pretty freaking good. So like, replacing, that's not an easy thing to do. And with everything going on in college basketball and college sports with the portal and NIL and all the stuff I already talked, like, okay, I don't know. I feel like there's definitely a growing segment of the fan base that either, wants a head coaching change or just a complete coaching staff changes, and is growing more and more apathetic. But, there's still plenty of people I talk to on social media that are like, yeah, the season's been a disaster, but come on, man, we got to give them more than 2 years. There've been plenty of other coaches that have come into a big program and struggled for a few years initially. And so I don't know. It's just a shame that this is like the dominant topic that we're talking about. And I'm not just saying me and you, just like, in general, like the media and fans. And it's just like, it's like more about Autry's job security or lack of security versus like the team itself, But I guess that's what happens when the team's not good.
That's my point, Neil.
Yeah.
If this team was the opposite, if they were 16-11, we're not
We
having
wouldn't
a
having this
conversation about Adrian Autry's job.
No.
We're not. We're going to sit here and say, are they in the bubble for the tournament, or he's done enough at least to warrant a third year?
Right.
It's the fact that they are so bad that this has become a conversation. And I'm going to get to your point in just a moment here. We're joined by Neil Adler from Inside the Loud House, talking about really the future outlook of Syracuse basketball and the ACC tournament. I think we both want them to make it. Adrian Autry is who we're talking about now. It's going to be a dominant topic for really the rest of the season and whether or not he deserves a third year or not. You do bring up a good point about social media. And it's just the way that social media works. It's in the algorithm with it. So it's tough to gauge whether or not that most people want him fired or most people want him to get a third year.
Yeah.
I think more than half of the fan base wants him gone. I think most of the fan base, and I think overwhelmingly most of the fan base, would not care if he gets a third year or not. Meaning they're not going. There's a large amount of people who are vocal that they don't want Adrian Autry back. Like they don't want him. I'm in that camp. I don't want him back. Then there is this group of people, and I think it's a lot of people, they don't care if he's back or not. If he gets a third year, all right, we'll give him one more year. If they fired him tomorrow, you know what? It's deserved. It's deserved. Your team stinks this season one way or another. And I think it's only a small portion of people that actually want to see Adrian Autry back. I really think that. I think it was Orange Fizz did a poll out there, and they had over 2,000 votes on the poll.
Yeah.
And it was like 75% wanted him gone. Now, I understand that fans don't make the ultimate decision here, but that's my point. I think a lot of people would not mind if he was not here for a third year.
Yeah, I did see that. I think that this has been people that didn't want someone from the Boeheim family tree, so to speak, they wanted an outsider. Like that's a whole nother story. But like if Wild Hack and the athletic department, they determined that it's going to be some, an assistant, I think Autry probably was a way to go. Although certainly some people have said GMAC, but neither of them have had head coaching experience, but Autry's been an assistant coach for longer. So I personally was like fine with that. And for people to suggest that like GMAC should come in now, first of all, I want him to kick some butt at Siena and then see where that leads him. But I don't think that's the answer either. I'm of the mindset that the season's been awful, but last season was pretty solid given context, that like I'm okay with Autry having a third year, but if they are like this next year, then I think a change needs to be made. So I'm not like gung-ho about it, but I'm also like not like, oh, you need to fire him right now, because it's one bad season and plenty of other coaches have had one bad season. But it obviously, if it was going to become a trend, you see it in season 3 and beyond, then that's a thing. And it's also, it's like, even though they've been bad this year, like, is it fair to like give a guy a hook after one bad season? Fair maybe is not the right word. I don't know. I mean, we're in a day of age with social media and just where college sports are, that it's like, what have you done for me lately? And if you're not producing, you're going to get the axe. So like, if they finished at 11-20 and Wild Hack decided to make a move, it wouldn't surprise me. And I'd, as on a personal level, I like Autry, and so I'd feel bad for him from that standpoint. But I'd be like, okay, fine, they stunk this year, and it's time for a clean slate. But I also am fine if I'm not happy about this season, but I'm fine with him coming back for another season, because I feel like, I'm not saying it's like about him deserving it. I just feel like I get it either way. Do you know what I'm saying? Like, I would understand either way. I feel like it's hard for me to wrap my head around predicting that even if the season ends at 11-20, that he's going to get fired, because I just don't see it. I do not see, given his ties to the schools, a longtime associate head coach and former star player, and the class coming in, again, I don't think Kyan and Sadiq are going to lead this team to a Final Four all on their own. But with, and the fact that he had a solid first year, I just don't see it happening. I do not. Do you really think that even if they finish 11-20, that he get fired after 2 years?
No, I don't. And I'll tell you why. I don't know if they're actually serious.
Yeah.
I don't know if they're actually serious about understanding the brand of Syracuse basketball. It's not training camp here. This is not a mid-major school, although it's certainly looking like a mid-major school right now.
Yeah.
I'm telling you this. Here's who I compare it to. Hubert Davis at North Carolina.
Mm-hmm.
If Hubert Davis at North Carolina went 11-20, you think he's sniffing another year? You think that, do you think North Carolina would give him another year of coaching? Do you think they would? I don't think they would.
I mean, it's tough because with him, like, was it his first year when he went to the title game?
Here's how it is with Hubert Davis, who, by the way, is on the hot seat at North Carolina. He has done significantly more at that program than Adrian Autry has done. Granted, it's been 4 years with Hubert Davis, but you tell me if Adrian Autry is going to match what Hubert Davis did in the 2 years where they made the tournament, and it might be 3 depending on what happens this season.
Right.
Goes to the national semifinal. Then he has an epic failure in year 2 where he's the preseason number 1 team, and then they become the first preseason number 1 to miss the tournament outright. I don't think that's ever happened up until North Carolina did it.
Right.
And then last season, they were a number 1 seed, and they lost to Alabama in the Sweet 16. So it was disappointing, the tournament result, but they were really good during the season.
And Alabama went on to the Final Four. So, like,
Alabama was really good. So
a 4-1, like, yeah, they had a good season though. You're right. And actually, if I'm not mistaken, they actually went to the title game in 2022. They beat
Duke.
They
beat Duke in that.
So, like, they were like an 8th seed. They weren't obviously highly, but I mean, yeah. So, sure. I mean, he's been there. This is his 4th year. He's a 1 seed, went to the Sweet 16, an 8 seed, went to the title game, missed it 1 year, which was not good. But yeah, that's still clearly now. Is it an apples to, no pun intended, oranges comparison, though? You're comparing UNC basketball to Syracuse basketball in terms of recent history. I mean, North Carolina won a championship in 2017. They went to the final game in 2016. It's the same year that Syracuse went to the Final Four in 2016 as a double-digit seed. Yeah, I mean, but Hubert Davis, to answer, yeah, if they went 11-20, he'd probably get fired. And didn't he make comments recently about how they need to hire a GM and they need to, this is not North Carolina basketball? And they've been a disappointment. I mean, they've got a lot of talent on that roster. A couple of former Syracuse recruiting targets, Cadeau and Ian Jackson, and got RJ Davis, but they've been a disappointment. There's no guarantee they're making the tournament, but I feel like even if North Carolina, not that to digress, but I feel like even if North Carolina misses the tournament this year, I don't think he's going to get fired because I don't think they're finishing under 500. So
I think he is getting fired.
You think so?
If they miss the NCAA tournament, he's getting fired. I think he's gone.
So? Okay.
I think North Carolina is more serious. And it's not I guess the way I should phrase it is this with Hubert Davis.
Mm-hmm.
Let's say Hubert Davis in his 2nd year at North Carolina, and he goes 11-20. Do you really think that North Carolina would bring him back? I don't see that happening. I get that in the first year and keep in mind, in his first season, they went to the national.
Yeah, I mean,
so if they went 11-20 in his 2nd year, they might actually have let him go. They might have let him go at the end of last season if they weren't a number 1 seed in the tournament.
Mm-hmm,
That's how serious they are at North Carolina. Meanwhile, it's like I get that Adrian Autry won 20 games in his first season. Keep in mind, one of those games was against Chaminade.
That's true.
Doesn't really count in my book, but sure, you won 20 games. You didn't even make the tournament in year 1.
Right.
Like, Neil, if Syracuse basketball over the next 10 years, they have Adrian Autry as head coach, they go 20-11 in every regular season, but they never make the NCAA tournament in one of those years. Are you happy?
No.
Okay, so what is the point?
Yeah. No, I mean, this team, whatever the regular season record is or number of total. No, they need to be hearing their name called on Selection Sunday. There's no excuse for that. I'm sorry. Even if they're not, in the top tier of ACC, even though the ACC is not nearly as dominant as some of these other leagues like the SEC is. No, they if they're not even contending for NCAA tournament bids, that's absurd.
If you like this podcast, be sure to hit that like button. If you really enjoy the podcast, be sure to hit subscribe. And if you could just tell 1 or 2 of your Syracuse friends about Locked On Syracuse, that would be terrific. It helps the channel grow and reach all Syracuse Orange fans. Neil, before I let you go, where can people find you on social media?
Oh, thanks, buddy. So, and I appreciate you having me on. So it's, I'm at Damn Twin, and more importantly, the inside the Loud House is Loud House FS. So appreciate you having me on, bud.
Of course, anytime, Neil. Hopefully better days are ahead. Thank you for making Locked On Syracuse your first listen today. For your second listen, you can check out the Locked On College Basketball podcast with Isaac Shade and Andy Patton. Don't wait for March. Be the most informed college basketball fan right now. Find Locked On College Basketball on YouTube or wherever you get your podcasts.